Mary, I am so excited to have you back on the Radical Radiance Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh my gosh, I like the chance to come back on here and talk about this new book of yours. Like, I would not be anywhere else. Thank you so much for including me. Yeah.
Well, I am so excited. I was thinking about friends that I wanted to include in this series that we're doing about each individual chapter of Do the Thing. And as I thought about the chapter called Silence the Inner Critic, obviously you were the first person that I thought of, and you speak so well to this topic, and it just made so much sense to have this conversation with you. So I'm super excited about it. Structured these conversations when we have started with scripture and pulled a couple of passages that we really unpack in that particular chapter and kind of tee us off there. And then we'll sort of go from there as we unpack the rest. And so the first passage that I pulled out of that chapter was 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 14 through 17. So I'm going to read that for us. It says, "But thanks be to God, who in Christ always leads us in triumphal procession, and through us spreads the fragrance of the knowledge of him everywhere. For we are the aroma of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. To one a fragrance from death to death, to the other a fragrance from life to life. Who is sufficient for these things? For we are not, like so many peddlers of God's word, but as men of sincerity, as commissioned by God." I've always loved this verse of just remembering that we are the aroma of Christ. The literal meaning of that word is the fragrance of Christ. And so I just wonder, as I read that passage, how does that challenge you in your daily life to remember that that's what we get to be, right? The fragrance of Christ to those around us. How does that challenge you?
Oh, wow. First of all, like, I'm sitting here thinking if I've ever actually dug into that particular scripture, and I don't know that I have, especially with that definition of fragrance. And so what it makes me think of right off the bat is there's actually an entry in my first book, Dirt, where I'm talking about joy and how when I was growing up in Sunday school, we just mostly talked about Nebuchadnezzar. So we just spent a lot of time on that guy. I don't know why. We were never taught, like, we were called to joy or what quiet time was or how to worship or anything like that. And so being an adult and coming into the Christian world and sort of always feeling just like a little bit on the outside of the closed circle, it felt to me at some of the early conferences that I went to that there were people who were selling joy as if it were a perfume. And I'm like, I could picture the like actress in like a field of pink flowers laughing on the cover, the smell of it being pumped into the room like Abercrombie and Fitch, you know, like it was too sweet to be real. It was too manufactured to be real. And I said something to the effect of, you know, this actress is sitting among these flowers, these wildflowers, except none of them are truly wild. Every one of them from a forced greenhouse into bloom, all pale pink. And when I looked closer, they were all planted in, you know, astroturf, not even real dirt, right? And so it brought it back to dirt. And so what I love about thinking about us getting to walk into the room and be the aroma of Christ is that in my mind, it becomes the opposite of that, right? It is not this kind of thing that knocks you over, or you can smell it 12 stores down in the mall, or it just like, it's so sickeningly sweet that it doesn't refresh like a cool breeze into a stale room. And that when you walk in, there's just a ever so imperceptible, almost subtle shift that makes people relax and feel calm and feel a little bit of peace the same way that just a gentle breeze would. And it's very tempting for us in a world that rewards the people who are okay working with the tools of the times, the social media, you know, attention machine. It's very easy for fragrance that's manufactured to become the loudest in the room. So what that tells me is we get the benefit of being subtle. Right? Yeah. We get the option of being subtle. We get to draw people in with that aroma rather than overpower them.
That's so good. And it's reminding me of another metaphor that I use a lot. And we say this often, right? We have to make sure we continue to fill our cups, because when we pour out to others all the time, we end up, you know, dry and empty. And when we think about filling our cup with and time with the Lord in prayer, and like we are filling our cups with something every day, right? And if we all have a cup, we walk into that room and our cups are going to spill against other cups all day long, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's remembering like what is spilling when my life spills into the lives of others around me. Like, let it be Jesus, right? Like, may it be Jesus. And so as you're talking about analogy of walking into a room and that imperceptible fragrance or aroma, I'm thinking of that, you know, that almost rougher analogy of our cups spilling into one another. And in the same way, let it be Jesus that spills. Right?
Dang, that's
because
so good.
our
And
cups.
I was just going to say, one theory of the origin of toasting glasses is that a little bit of your liquid would fall into the other person's cup. So if you were trying to poison them, and vice versa, if you were trying to poison them, some of that poison would come back into yours. So it was sort of like a show of trust that, like, us bumping up against one another, we're not going to poison one another. That's so good because, man, it's so easy to do. When you are in that bitter place, when you're in that toxic place, when you're not processing grief or hurt, it's so easy to spill that out on other people.
Yeah, that's so true. I hadn't thought about it that way. That's so good. Well, and another piece of just silencing our inner critic that I think really helps me is a passage that I have journaled through. I can't tell you the number of times, and it's from Philippians 4. And we walk through this in the book of kind of walking through a thought life inventory. So to read that passage in Philippians 4, it's verse 8, it says, "Finally, brothers, whatsoever is true, honorable, just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there be any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise about these things." And we're probably, most of us, familiar with that verse in Philippians and Paul's words there. What I have found helpful is to walk myself through two lists of questions when maybe I'm believing something that I'm thinking back of, wait, like God didn't say that to be true about me, and I'm believing something that needs to be transformed. And I point myself to that passage, and the first list of questions that I work through is this, and then I love those words that Paul says in verse 8, right? Is this true? Is this honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, worthy of praise? And that can be very revealing. And then I go over to the right-hand side of my paper and then ask myself the list of questions that starts with what is, right? If that's not true, then what is true? What is lovely? What is commendable and worthy of praise that God says in his word about this particular issue, or maybe this thing that I know you and I talked about that when we talked on your show as well. And I wonder, as you think about that exercise, as we, you know, find ourselves believing those things that God never said about us, how do those truths encourage you?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I love that because I think it's like, it's one thing. I love that you have that two-step process. It's one thing to go, is this true? No. And then just leave somebody there. And it has to be anchored in, for every lie that your inner critic would love to tell you, that, I mean, man, I am so much meaner to myself than I would ever consider being to anybody else. And in fact, we probably share this a little bit in common, having that really strong achiever drive. I know you said you are an achiever. I have a very, very strong achiever wing. I'm a 4 wing 3. I have often found myself saying, there is nobody harder on me than me, as if it were a badge of my work ethic or my excellence or the standard I hold myself to. There's nobody harder on me than me. And I think there's like a really cool softening that comes with age, where it's sort of like you can't hold your fist clenched tight for that long, and so it starts. And it is this idea of, instead of like creating out of punishment or creating out of like, you know, driving yourself as hard as you can go to the point of collapse, what does it look like to create from a place of love? Like, if you actually loved yourself, or you actually acted like you were beloved by the creator of the universe, how would your work change? What would the creations you put into the world change? And there's a part in Slow Growth where I talk about like, would the pain etched from the psalm or the psalm etched from our pain or something like that. And it talks about like, would every word become a worship? Would every painting become poetry in motion or something like that? It's better than that in the actual sense.
Beautiful.
But it is this idea for me. It's like, you know, we for a long time have used that inner critic, because at least if the inner critic was speaking, I got stuff done. And that's really hard to admit. There's a part in Slow Growth, you know, we revisit the girl in the red cape from the perspective of the wolf, and it says at a certain point the big bad wolf is afraid of her because she has learned how to twist the thorn in its paw to send it roaring back into fight or flight mode anytime she needs it. And that's how I've operated with my inner critic. I might not like him or her very much. It's very much a worker who, at least we help each other get stuff done. And that's messed up.
Cool.
And I'm going to stop doing that.
Yeah. We all do, though. I mean, It is so hard, and you and I talked about this before we got on, even in what we do for a living. It is so stifling when we get caught in that trap, and it just kills my creativity and my joy. Like, back to joy.
Right.
My inner critic is just a joy stealer. And certainly has been in this season. Even it's just been an opportunity to live out part of the message of what you write, right? Which I feel like God always gives us the opportunity to do. And another piece that I touch on in the book is how sometimes our inner critic is so loud that it can really make decision making difficult. And I talk about this idea of just decision paralysis that I know I sometimes get in. What happens in your life? I wonder what helps you sort of find a way forward when you're stuck in that decision paralysis.
Well, I mean, I love that you talk about this in the book, and I don't think it's something like people realize they're doing enough. Like how many places they're playing small and how much they're holding back from where God might be calling them, the purpose that's in their life, the gifts that he's given them. There's so many people who are, a world full of achievers slow limping around like the Walking Dead, because at a certain point to create nothing is safer than to create failure. We would rather create nothing than risk creating failure. And I think that's at the heart of it, right? It's like this idea of we're so afraid that, if we don't know the perfect blueprint, if it's not perfect when we start, if we don't know every step on the staircase, if we aren't sure we can stay consistent with it, or if we aren't sure we have the bandwidth for it, so let's just wait until we can do all those things. We don't know if we should do this way or that way. We think we have to wait until it's all figured out before we get started, but the truth is, anything I've ever done, you have to get started in order to figure it out. And so for me, in those times when I'm really overthinking it, because the ultimate heart of why we're overthinking it is, if I choose wrong, then I'll fail and I'll never get another chance again. That failure will define me forever. If I send in the wrong proposal for a book and it doesn't get picked up, I'll never get to write another book again, the chance to write it. I'm really getting in my head, or one of my coaching clients is really getting in their head. I love that quote from Marie Forleo that says, it's all figure outable.
It's all figure outable.
If it doesn't work, it's all figure outable. We'll pivot, we'll adjust, we'll adapt, but motion breeds clarity.
Yeah, that's so good, so good. Well, and there's one more truth that I think changes everything for me when I'm feeling really stuck and my inner critic is loud. And I share a story in the book of a moment I had in one of my marathons. I had one of my worship playlists kind of on shuffle towards the end of the route, and this one particular song came on, and I'll never forget this moment, the song Yahweh by Elevation Worship, which is now so old because this marathon 8 or 10 years ago. But there's a line at the end of that song, and it says, "He who was and is to come is the one who lives in us, the great I am, Yahweh." And I remember reflecting on that truth of the one who was and is to come lives in me as a Christ follower. The same power that raised Jesus from the grave. It's not all up to me. It's not all on me, right? I get to lean into him as I make these hard decisions. And so I wonder for you, does that make you rest easier? It just makes me just exhale when I remember that biblical truth and just rest in that as my inner critic is really loud. That helps me kind of move forward. So I wonder, how does that encourage you?
Yeah, I love that so much. And then what it makes me think of is sort of paying attention to the track record. God has a track record of being right about me. He has a 100 track record of being right about where I'm headed, and being right about who I can help, and being right about how I can be used. And then when I think about that inner critic, or I think about, I think I actually have both. Honestly, I think I have an inner critic that is me in some form, and then I think I have just another voice in there that is an enemy. Maybe they're the same, I don't know, but I think if I'm being honest, I'm kind of a bully to myself as well. And both of those voices, they're very loud, but something I've learned in real life and in my head is that the loudest voices in the room, it doesn't mean they're right. In fact, a lot of times they're seldom right, because they've spent too much time focusing on volume than content. And so I just look at those track records, and all the times that I've said these things about myself of it's too late, it's too far gone, you've messed up again, you'll never get it right, why are you always like this? When you play out the variable of time, they're never right. I never stay where I am. I might be down on the floor for a day, but I don't stay there. And so I just look at the track records, this idea of Audrey Roloff talks about faithfulness demands his present trust. And so his track record of, if he tells me something, we're headed somewhere, I don't need to know the how, or I don't need to tell him all the ways that I am going to mess it up, or I'm not qualified. If he says it, he's 100%, 100% track record of being right. Yeah.
That's so good. I love that so much. Well, as we think about the girl who is going to be coming to this conversation and walking through this piece of the book of just getting her arms around how do I realize what's true and silencing her inner critic along the way, I wonder what would be your best piece of advice for that woman listening who just desperately perspective?
Yeah. Something that has really been changing my life this year, and I would say and it's almost like a year to the day actually, is I had Dr. Allison Cook on my podcast to talk about her book, The Best of You. And she was talking about this concept of capacity and reparenting. And like if you grew up kind of in a little bit of a chaotic childhood, or if you grew up where things felt unstable, you can become an adult who unintentionally self-sabotages. Realize you're doing it. You self-sabotage because there's this real belief that if you get a little bit more than like this little shot glass of capacity you think you can handle, then it will be the downfall of you, right? There's so many people who are listening right now where, yeah, you're afraid of failure, but you're even more afraid of who you might become if you get a little bit more than just barely get by. Will it be your downfall? Will you mess it up? Will you mismanage it? Will you become prideful? Will it bring talks about the way that we start to expand our capacity? And we're going to define capacity as self-trust. Not that you're putting your faith in yourself, but that you trust yourself to steward things well, your gifts well, to take these opportunities and these chances well. As you make small but important commitments to yourself and you keep them. So if you're listening and you have an inner critic that says your voice doesn't matter, but you feel called to use your words, commit to showing up this week. Commit to showing up for just a few. Commit to writing a post that will help just one person at a time, and let you saying yes to those commitments prove to you there is somebody in the room who can handle this and will be a good steward of these gifts, and that person is you. That this self-trust of, I won't use this for selfish reasons. I won't use this just to put attention on me, just to be that, Abercrombie fragrance in the room. You learn that little by little, stewarding little by little. Those who are trusted with little can be trusted with much. So that's my advice. Little steps, baby steps.
I love that. So good. So good. So good and so practical. Well, there is a question that I ask every guest that comes on the show. You've answered this question before, and the reason I love asking it is because the Lord's always at work in us, and this answer can change over time. And so the podcast is called Radical Radiance, with a heart to help women see what does it look like for us to radiate the heart of Jesus in our life, our work, our relationships. So I wonder today, Mary, how would you answer the question of what about Jesus makes you radiant?
The phrase that came to mind, I did not plan this ahead of time actually, but the phrase that just came to mind when you were talking is saltwater. And what I mean by that is I think I've, for the last for a year to the day, been walking through a season where there's just been a lot of salt water in my life, mostly in the form of tears. We're walking out by the water, by our house, spending a lot of time having hard conversations with God of like, how much longer? How much longer till all of these things are true? And, I guess just sort of like that visual of the song Oceans, the Spirit lead me, or my trust is, without borders, where we can walk upon the water, whatever. And so what is making me radiant is like, don't underestimate what some good salt water, some good tears, and actually being by the water can do for that glow. You glow differently when you spend a little time with salt water and Jesus.
That's so good. That's beautiful. I love that. Well, Mary, I could not be more thankful for you, your voice, your friendship. And before we go, I want to make sure and let everybody know, where can they listen to your show? Where can they grab your books and all of those?
Yeah, well, everybody should come listen to our full episode all about your book over on the Mary Marantz Show. You can go to the marymarantzshow.com, click over to the blog and just search for Rebecca, and it'll bring up that episode, or we'll link it up in these show notes maybe.
Yeah.
And that's just a beautiful conversation. I mean, I really hope that in the midst of this conversation about inner critics, I think one of the best antidotes to the inner critic is celebration. And I just read that book having come out, and I just hope you have taken some time to really see what a monumental thing you have accomplished, that 85% of people in the world want to do, and 1% of people actually make happen. And you have done that. And so, yes, everybody go check out that episode and tell our girl how proud of her we are. And at Mary Marantz on Instagram, you can come send me a DM. Actually, here's a really fun thing you can do is go to, or you'll see it on the site, marymarantz.com/quiz.
Yes, I love this quiz.
Yeah, and find out which of the 5 achiever types you are. We've got a performer, a tightrope walker, a contortionist, a masquerader, and an illusionist in the distance, waiting on things to be perfect. So are you always on your toes? Do you twist up into tiny knots so you won't be criticized? Do you hide in plain sight? Quiz takes 2 minutes. It'll tell you your type, what your inner critic might be telling you that gets you stuck and how you move forward with purpose. And then send me a DM on Instagram at Mary Marantz.
Love that quiz so much. I'm a performer, which you know.
Yes,
and
me too.
Yeah, it is so helpful. And the thing I love so many things about you, Mary, but one of them is you are so poetic in the way that you speak and in the way that you write, and yet you are so practical. And a lot of people have one or the other, and you have both. And that's the beautiful thing about how God made you. I see it in your writing. I see it in conversations I have with you. And so for our friends who are checking you out on your podcast or the quiz or your books, you will absolutely find that in Mary. And so I could not be more thankful for you and just all you've poured into my life, and just was so excited to have this conversation with you today. So thank you for being with me.
Well, I love you, and same. And I feel like we have found each other for a reason. And 10 or 15 years from now, we'll be looking back on these days.
We will. I cannot wait for that.
Yeah.